Welcome to episode 2 of What Keeps Us Up.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for the support. Yes. All the feedback from the first episode, super fun. Yes. Just right off the gate, yes, we are in a hotel. I am transitioning. Wait, pause. I am transitioning, not that kind of transitioning. I'm transitioning moving spaces, so we had to make do. I just had to get that out the way.
Yeah.
And also I'm transitioning. I'm kidding.
Oh my god. Yeah, I loved hearing all the comments on everyone's thoughts on friendships and that whole episode.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to start off this episode, as promised, on personality types.
Yes.
I think this is something Dillon can talk about in his sleep.
Yes, literally. I have spent... Okay, alright, hold on. I don't know what you have planned, but let me start here. If you are into Myers-Briggs... and the 16 personality types, and that whole trend, or it's Enneagram or whatever, most of it is BS. Just off the bat. That's what I want to say off the bat. If you take time to actually learn and study, like, what's behind whatever your type is, whatever the letters are, blah, 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 then it's incredible and it's amazing. But just the actual personality type, like, it can be so stereotyped. It's useful to just kind of, like, maybe get a sense of different vibes or whatever, but like in terms of actually, I don't know, using it in your everyday life, there's so much more depth there, and so like, I don't know, I'm very passionate about this. As you can tell, I just hijacked this entire thing, but I've spent like years studying it. I'm not like an expert or anything, but I'm an expert, so.
Okay. On the other hand, I had the surface level understanding what Dillon just said to not believe in, which is that I've taken like every test out there, like 16 personalities, Myers-Briggs, DISC, all these other ones, and I'm like, oh, this is what I am. I like this. This is cool. Or, yeah, it makes sense. And every single time, every single thing that I came up as made sense to me. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I am like this, or I am like that. But I have not went down the rabbit hole or studied personality types like you have. So I think I want to pick a lot of your brain today for this episode, because I'm like, okay, like, I want to know what got you into this, but also, like, things you can tell us about personality types.
And I think, I do want to say, though, I came off really aggressive, also kind of just for fun, because I love ranting about this. I love ranting. But I do think it's really good that, like, it's really popular, because I got into 16 personalities. I'm using that as an example, but Enneagram, all of those different variations, they're all different versions of the same thing. I think they are really useful for just starting out. Like, if you don't have a clear sense of yourself, or you want to know more about other people, it's a great starting point. So I'm glad it's popular. It's just like, there's a difference between that and them being like, oh, I am the creator personality type, so I can only be friends with creative people. You know what? Like, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just wanted to preface it by saying that it's a good thing that it is as popular as it is. Yeah.
I also, going to say this, I don't believe in personality types.
What?
I don't think I've ever told you that.
No?
In that way. Yeah, I don't.
Well, I think I know where you might be going with this, and I probably agree, but.
Yeah, I think you will. I don't believe in, because I have seen people act in complete opposite ways of their innate nature.
Yeah.
In so many different situations, and in so many different spaces where I'm like, being labeled a personality type can sometimes, like, when you are using it to perceive other people, is actually more harmful than not, because you're boxing them in.
Yeah,
when you
I agree with that.
Because you know yourself best. I think generally I would like to say that about self-aware people. There are people that might not know themselves best.
Yeah, more people than you might think.
Yeah, but I'm saying generally, at least people that are self-aware, they know themselves. So they know that whatever they're receiving as this outcome, like, you are an ENTJ, FP, whatever it is, like, you know what they are. It's like, does it mean that I'm always extroverted? No, I know I have days when I feel introverted, but I am an extroverted person. Am I always thinking? No, there are days I want to turn my brain off and blah, 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 but, generally, those things make sense to me, but I'm also, like, I do act in opposite ways during some days. I'm not this all the time.
Yeah.
But when I receive it for someone else, as the one, perceiving that person, you can box them in because you don't know that person inside out kind of thing. No matter how good you know them, how well you know them, you can't, at least when you perceive them, if someone tells me they're extroverted, I'm only, okay, this person's extroverted. Like, I've just labeled them.
Yeah.
Or this person's judgmental, I've labeled them. This person's creative, I've labeled them. And that label is pretty wide when you use it for yourself because you know yourself so well, but it's not that wide when you give it to someone else that you don't know really well because I'm actually literally boxing them in. In my brain, once you're creative, I'm like, this person's so creative, I'm going to go to them for this. And, I don't know otherwise until I find out otherwise. Or this person's so extroverted until I see them on a day that they're not extroverted. So I feel like personality types don't necessarily exist in the same sense, and I don't believe in it in the same way because I'm like, it's only good for me. So I've always liked it when I received a, answer for myself. I'm like, oh, I am type 9, or I am INTJ, whatever, whatever it is. I'm like, yeah. And I think it's fun, and it's great, and I like introspection and reflecting, but I do not like to know other people sometimes. Yeah. Because I'm like, I know I'm just gonna put them in a box.
And see, here's where I would... So one thing that I found is that I did that, and you always run the risk when you think of personality types, right? I just did it not that long ago, and I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, I bought this person in, I was so wrong, blah, 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 blah. But for the most part, I've gotten better at it. I think one thing that I found is that I actually, the more I learned about personality types, the less I thought about it. And so, literally, because now I'm at a point, and this is where I think it's helpful for everyone, now I'm at a point to where it's so ingrained in my brain that I don't even think about it, that it's unconscious. And I can much more quickly pick up on, I don't even try to figure out exactly what the person's type is, but I narrow it down to at least 3 letters, or this is most likely what they are, within 5 minutes of talking to them. And then you can better bounce off people that way. I just started a new job. Yeah. And within the first day, within the first few conversations, okay, this person operates this way, this person operates that way, this one's probably an extrovert, probably an introvert, blah, 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 blah. That, obviously that's just human interaction, so that's a very base level of it, but when you have all of, for example, when you know, function theory and all, if you spend time really looking into personality types, all that is in the background, and you don't even realize the kinds of decisions that you're making, why you chose to say or not to say something to a specific person because you know they would react a certain way. And it's not even so much as because you can still be totally authentic within yourself. It just helps you know how to communicate with other people. But then you realize, because you get to a certain point, when you get to a certain point of depth with personality types, you do realize most of it is just a tool. Yeah. If you're using it to make your decisions, you're using it wrong. So I agree with you in that sense, because we're all three-dimensional people. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, that's my thought on that. But yeah, the more that I learned about it, the less it's actively in my mind. Yeah.
That's so cool. Wow. So what made you get into it really initially? Were you why did you even decide to go down that?
I don't remember the exact thing. I started looking into it when I was 13 or something, and I think I just found the trend like everyone else, but then, I don't know, maybe it's just my nature. I just have always been interested in people, and it was really appealing, because that's the other thing. Sometimes labels are appealing, or sometimes it's just being able to...
Because it helps you better understand people.
Yeah, and so I was this is why this person is doing that, blah, 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 blah. It also specifically helped me to figure out people that I couldn't understand. I was why do they act that way? Why do I have issues with them? So it helped me, it just made me, kind of want to work on myself more. Yeah. And so I just started, I started by watching, looking at memes like everyone else, and then I started searching up videos about it, and then those videos led to articles. And then there were a couple of different channels that specifically broke down each type, and then they were oh, did you know that there are actual functions that relate to certain behaviors that have a hierarchy in your brain? So if you are an extrovert, you have introverted qualities. They're called functions, but you have introverted qualities or tendencies, but those are just muscles that haven't been worked as much. That was all really interesting to me, because the thing that I really liked and I still love about personality.
Okay, nerd. Sorry, you
no, I see. This
I'm like, wow.
I'm keeping it based.
No, I love it.
I'm keeping it like as high level as I possibly can.
No, I'm loving it. I'm just playing with you.
Yeah. The thing that I loved about learning about these types was that they were very, like, all the different creators were very, very intentional about saying no type is better than the other, and each type is the best at what they're good at. They're better than anyone else. You know what I mean? And I really liked that because it was encouraging in the sense that it was like, no, there is a lane for me.
Wow, that's
you know
so
what I
cool.
mean?
Yeah, that there is no hierarchy. It's like it's all there's nothing's not one's better than the other or anything. It's just different aspects, and you might have more or less of some of qualities other people will have more or less of. So that's really cool. And I love that. Like, when I thought I was looking into it, I'm like, wow, like, I can't believe I like doing this. And then when I met you, I felt validated.
Yeah.
But to a whole different level because I was like, oh my god, I can't believe, you know, you went down that rabbit hole for years and you had so much knowledge on it, so I appreciated that. But I want to get back to the one point you made, which was issues when it comes to personality types.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I could talk about this forever.
So let's start that piece of it.
Okay. So well, the thing is, I think, I don't know, I view people in a way, like, I feel like we are all much stronger personalities than we realize. And we have these elements of ourselves that we don't realize are so, like, they're so obvious to other people, but sometimes we're blind to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm reacting to someone who is maybe kind of blind to how much they are a certain way or not or whatever, and that way is totally opposite to me, then it's like, how do I navigate this person? Like, whether it's friends, whether it's like bosses, like anyone, like, for example, for me, like, I'm very outgoing, creative, blah, 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 blah. How do I deal with someone who is unemotional, strictly logical, strictly, like, regimented, super disciplined, but, like, literally they are like a freaking, like, accountant or something, and they just go home, and they're super organized, and that's it. But they might have a really great insights. Like, they might be, like, and I'm using, like, don't take the analogy too seriously, but, like, and I'm, like, certain types, like an ISTJ, for example, total opposite of me, but those people might be really self-disciplined, really organized, even in like, their finances and their diet and the way they eat, all the things that I'm like, I that doesn't interest me, you know what I mean? I want to run around and be creative or whatever. And so I think always those, like, issues that you may have with people, then it ends up being a way that you can learn from each other. But for me, the issue that I would always have is that I didn't realize, because, well, this is the other thing, this is a tangent, but just forgive me. We're talking about labels, right? I had my personality type wrong for 5 years. And this is crazy, right? Because I was able to get everyone else's right. And I knew it, like, literally, like, for the most part, I can type with pretty much, you know, like, 95% accuracy. But how you see yourself is so different, right? And so I was like, oh, I'm definitely a thinker because I think a lot and I'm logical. And it was such base level thinking, you know what I mean? But then once I realized, I was like, no, I'm actually a feeler. I feel deeply and emotionally. I realized, I was like, that's why I've had so many friendships, so many experiences where I was so invested emotionally in people who they just didn't operate in their relationships that way. And so I would always come on way too strong because I didn't realize my whole personality is coming on too strong. So I needed to be around people who are the same way. Otherwise, I would constantly feel this, like, lack, if that makes sense. And so part of, like, issues-wise, it was just me trying to figure out that. And also trying to figure out why I was so strange. Like, and why I was so strange and goofy and, like, you know what I mean? And I realized, I'm like, oh, like, there's other people that have this type that are also, like, you will not meet, like, I'm an ENFP, for example. There are very few ENFPs that you will meet that are not quirky in some kind of way. And that's okay, but it just helps you kind of realize a little bit more, like, what works, and if something doesn't work, why it doesn't work.
Right.
So it helps you accept it a little bit.
Yeah, I have so many different thoughts about this.
I'm sorry, I went too long.
No, oh my god, no, you're fine. I'm just thinking, like,
Yeah.
I ran through so many different thoughts in my head as you were speaking. So I'm
Just
trying
slow
to
down.
No, I'm trying to think of which one, like, to kind of go into. But
we were talking about issues, you know.
Sorry? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's the issues piece of it, which is, because for me, we talked about this last episode a little bit too. Love languages matter a lot more, and friendship love languages matter a lot more. So if we are two people and quality time and deep conversations is our kind of thing, then I would probably be good. You know what I mean? Regardless, because I've shared this with you. I have friends that are the complete opposite of me and the exact same as me across the spectrum. Generally, most of my friends are more on the introverted side. Like, I am usually the extrovert.
Yeah.
But I think that makes sense because of how extroverted I can be and am. And so I'm like, the issues piece of it is a little different because I'm like, for me it's issues in either values or fundamentally something's off and I don't become friends with them in the first place. Or the issue is the love language thing. Like, they're not giving me the time I want. They're not giving me the attention I want.
Yeah.
Or we're not having deep conversations and I want depth. I don't want to just sit and do nothing.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. I think that love languages and personality types, like, you can't really separate them.
Yeah.
Like, they make up, like, your love languages make up your personality. You know, like, and I'm saying, like, they inform those decisions.
Yeah. But there's things that juxtapose each other because it's like, my love language is quality time. My best friends are almost all introverts. But their love language is also has to be quality time. But it doesn't have to be taxing quality time. So for them, it's just sitting and being in each other's presence, but doing our own thing is fine. A study date is fine. Watching movies fine. But if it was like us go out and do things every single time, they would be like a no for them. So I'm saying it's, you know, people might see it a certain way, but it's like actually you can be an introvert and an extrovert regardless. Quality time be your thing.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that typically will also, that honestly, the quality time thing, just from like, I'll use 16 personalities because that's the most popular, that typically falls more within like, are you sensing or intuitive, S or N, or are you T or F? Because extrovert or introvert, it does like, because there are times, like I would say introverts probably even tend to value quality time even more than extroverts, generally. You know, but they just are very selective with who they spend that time with. But like I know, for example, but like the thing is though, you're right in the sense that like it's not always a 1-to-1. Like I remember I had this one big conversation with my mom who's an INTJ and I'm an ENFP. So two different types, very different types. They're similar in very key ways, but for the most part they're very different. And I remember I was younger, I think I was like 15 or 16, and I was like, I feel like we don't spend enough quality time. And I was like, I feel like I don't get, like I wasn't saying like I feel like you don't love me, but I was just like, I don't get that like warm and fuzzy feeling that I want from my mom sometimes, you know what I mean? Because I'm a very affectionate person. And she was like, I'm with you all the time. I drive you around everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. I'm saying like, let's watch a show together. Let's.
Yeah, I can't do that from my mom.
Let's, you know what I mean? But she was basically saying like, I am doing all these things for you, and I realized I was like, your love language is acts of service. Exactly.
I think that's the case
and
with
that,
so
like,
many.
broke it for me. Like, you know, it made
yes,
sense.
oh my god, that's the case with so many women. Like, like POC women especially. But I see it over and over and over again where affection is just so hard because of their upbringing, because of the way those communities are. I don't know why, but it's like, my mom will bend her back backwards for us. Like, she will do the craziest things.
Yeah.
She will not sleep if it means she can feed us and, like, take care of us and wake up in the morning, like, just to make sure we're good. All those things. But if I'm like, let's, like, go eat out together or go watch a movie together, she's like, what? Like, it's like...
You're like, what do you mean?
Yeah, literally. Literally. And I'm like, okay, sorry.
Yeah. And it's funny because I actually well, because at a certain point, because this is the other thing too, I think most people, like with personality types, and this is also where things, like, you get out of it what you put into it. And what I mean by that is, like, most people, generally speaking, they have their base personality type, which is this is what you're good at, this is what you're this is what you're bad at or whatever. And most people, generally, I have found at least, don't all, like, they're just like, okay, cool, that's good. Versus people who really, like, are growers and doers and drivers are like, I want to work on the thing that I suck at that makes some of my relationships that didn't work out, maybe I contributed to that because of this quality. And so for her, like, she was a thinking type, and so the common thing is like, oh, you are not emotional, blah, blah, blah. That's a real basic way of looking at it. But one thing I did learn through, like, having a deeper relationship with her is I was like, oh, wow, you really don't have a good handle on emotional topics. You're an emotional person like everyone else, but I was like, you really truly don't understand your feelings and understand other people's feelings like I do. Yeah. I was like, I didn't believe it. I was like, no, you're just not trying hard enough. Like, no, there was like a legit block. And that's how it is for a lot of thinking types if they haven't worked on that side of themselves. And I could talk about feeling types, but I'm just talking about thinking types right now. So I say all that to say, through this period of time, like with my mom, for example, I actually sent her personality type. I forced her to learn about it. I was like, this is what you're good at, but this is also what you're bad at. And this is why sometimes you run into issues with people. And the thing is too, initially she fought against it because she was like, everyone always tells me I'm cold. But I was like, I didn't say that. I didn't say you were cold. I know you're not cold. Deep down, you are an extremely passionate, loving person, and that comes through in your actions. But sometimes you don't always know how to express it. And so over those course of like 3-4 years, I would talk to her about it, blah, 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 blah. Now, her ability to deal with people's emotions, it's still not her strength. But like, I'll hear her say things or go out of her way for people or be willing to sit down and have deeper conversations with people in ways you would have thought it's a completely different person as opposed to 5 years ago.
Wow.
And so that's where
progress.
It's progress, but you have to work at it. You know what I mean?
Of
and of course, sometimes that happens without even looking at personality types. But sometimes you need a label to kind of be like, oh, this is what's going on there.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. I think with my mom, it is a little bit different because she is a very warm person. She's like a warm, loving person. She's super empathetic to other people. I was telling you, she's similar to you where she'll look at it from the other perspective almost at all times.
Yeah.
I'll tell her something and she's like, well, have you thought about... I'm like, no.
You're like, no, leave me alone.
Yeah, just agree with me. Stop. Like, I don't want to know about the other perspective.
You're like, what if the other perspective died? What if they died? What if I killed them?
Yeah, I'm like, don't worry about other people. Worry about me. Like, anyway, she's like a super nice and kind person. But it's hard for her to prioritize herself because she's basically been conditioned to prioritize other people almost like her whole life.
Yeah.
That's a different podcast episode though.
My mom's to act the same way. Literally the same way. Yeah. But I mean, coming back to the issues thing, because I feel like we never, officially got into it in the way that we once discussed. I think we were talking about it a couple of days ago when we were just conversing, and we were talking about a friend of ours and how you were saying like how some people are confrontational versus non-confrontational, and how they go about things differently, and I go about things differently, and how we should talk about it on the podcast. So I'd like pinned it in my brain. I was like, when we do a personality types episode, I'm gonna bring it up to you then. So I'm like, okay, yeah. So like, I want to know your thoughts. I didn't ask you to elaborate then because I'm like, we'll hash it out here. Where would you like me to start?
The start.
What does that mean?
Like the beginning.
Like the beginning of the conflict, or like.
Up to you.
Well, okay.
Like, what did you want to say about it?
Well, I think it was we should give some context. You know what I mean?
Of course. That's what I'm saying. Like, did we? Okay, let me give context.
Yeah.
So, this is a situation that I was facing and updating Dillon on a little bit.
Yeah.
But I had a friend who, was a really good friend of mine. We were very, very different people, but I later on told Dillon, I was like, I've been friends with different people, like that are similar to that person's personality type. Yeah. Her pronouns are she, her. Let me just say that. So I'll say she. So she at one point I feel like because we were so different, we were never ever like best friends or anything. It was always just friends, like passing friends. You'd hang
Yeah.
out with other people sometimes, that kind of thing. But I would consider us friends. And then at one point, I heard from other people who shared with me like, oh, like like she's worried that you might not like her, and I was like, oh, but why didn't she come to me and say that? And why is she going to all of my other friends and saying that to them? Like, I'm confused, basically.
This is a great example of.
Yeah, and I was like,
example.
I was so confused because I'm like, one, if I had an issue, I would say it to the person's face. Two, I am so big on communication. Three, I didn't even know we had an issue. Like, who knew we had an issue? Like, nothing. I'm so confused. And mind you, it's not her saying she doesn't like me. It's her saying she thinks I don't like her. So I'm over here like, why are you putting words in my mouth? I never said I don't like you. We're chill. We're good. Like, there's no, what's wrong? Like, and of course, all my close friends came and told me that. So I'm like, but they're like, don't tell her we said that. So I can't even be like, girl, I heard you were telling all my friends that I don't like you. So then I just would go to her and like, oh my god, hey, so to see like I spent multiple tries going up to her and being like, hey, how's it going? Hey, how are you? Like, what's up? Just being extra friendly almost to make up for I don't even know what still, in hopes that she would say. And every single time she'd be like, oh, like things were normal. So I'm like, and then some time passed. I would say a year later. Now we're again good friends, and once again we're not best friends. We're good friends. We hang.
I feel like when you guys were having those differences, or you just guys weren't on the same page, it was also because like the distance made it so where you guys wouldn't actually get in the same room and just like hang out again, you know what I mean? And then once we all just happened to be in a group together, because I literally would tell the both of you, I would be like, I don't think there's I think there was just like a misunderstanding here.
Yeah, but I still don't know what it is.
I know. But what I'm saying is, even like once you guys got back in the same room and actually spent real time, like for like a day, because we were all out for like the whole day, she was like, oh, like, we're good.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why this is a good example is because two very different personality styles, completely different. And I think, for example, like where you're saying, where you're like, how am I supposed to know if we're not good? Like, I didn't say anything to you like that because you're like, and again, label disclaimer here, like, you know what I mean? But that, like, because you're a thinking type, it's a lot, like, when it comes to emotions, it's a lot more like, if you didn't say it, how am I supposed to know? Like, communicate it to me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've had the same conversation with multiple, like, because it's more so, like, thinkers, even with emotions, they still systematize it down to, like, data. Of, like, okay, so this person said this, so now the situation is this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas, like, feelers, which I'm one, she is one, we operate on a totally different set of like everything. So sometimes it can come off as irrational.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of times we will be able to intuit very deeply something, and sometimes we might be wrong, but a lot of times the decisions that we make, no words even need to have to be said. You know what I mean? And like that, and there's like there's pros and cons to both. I'm saying
like it's not. So I guess this goes back to not even personality type or that characteristic of thinking versus feeling. I'm talking about inherently the principle of it when it comes to people's decisions, because regardless of what it may be like, thinking versus sensing, whatever it is, I would have just preferred to be communicated that information.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't make sense. Like, even if there was nothing that occurred that was like, I don't know why I think you don't like me. Or, I don't know why I think, like, nothing happened, but I feel like you don't like me. What, like, just the communication, I'm saying. I would have been like, wait, I love you. We're great.
And that's the thing that's...
nothing happened.
That's the thing that's tricky, especially once you start learning more about people and, like, through the lens of personality, whether it's personality types or not, because I think everyone is learning personality types, it's just whether or not you have a label or not. I think the tricky thing about learning deeply why people do the thing that they do is being able to understand that and validate that, but also be like, but you should have still done X, Y, and Z. And you know, kind of balancing the principle versus like, this is why this happened, but also this is what should have happened, if that makes sense. Like, I can look back on multiple friendships that I've had where, like, I was done wrong, like, unequivocally. Like, there, you know what I mean? And I can, there's another reason, like, you know, back to issues. Like, I spent years analyzing how we got there, why that person made the decisions that they made. I can tell you their personality, I knew them well. So I can completely live in that headspace from their point of view, but still be like, yeah, but that doesn't excuse what you did, if that makes sense. And sometimes, like, understanding the issue or understanding the personality type can help you kind of come together a little bit, but that it is definitely important to still kind of, like, look at it from the principle, because that and at the end of the day is just, like, the decisions you choose to make. Because there is, like, the decisions you choose to make versus which ones you will like, what your natural bent is.
Yeah.
And I feel like people who are, like, they try to be mindful of themselves and other people know when to maybe go against what they would naturally do because they know it might be problematic in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I just kind of thought of this, and I want to mention it to you. I see astrology similarly. And I went down that whole, like, that's where I spent years. Where I was down that astrology hole of, like, what sign are you? What does that mean? You know, and it's the same layout as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Some have
they're all very similar.
It's the same thing, but it's, like, also, there is a lot of, emphasis put on astrology in so many different cultures and in so many different spaces that you know, that's why I got into it in the first place. Especially Vedic astrology, like, in the Eastern world. It's used, I mean, like, my parents' signs and things were matched before they were, like, given the go by their elders to get married.
Wow.
Like, it's given that much importance to make sure you're compatible. And I was thinking on that, and I realized, I'm like, it's not, I personally don't think it's the best way to go about it, because once again, we box people in.
Yeah.
I have seen people who's, you know, are considered compatible and ended up not being compatible. And then those that were considered like, oh my god, those two signs or those two horoscopes would never match.
Exactly.
And then they are, like, you know, thriving in their relationship. And so I think, not to disregard it, because I think astrology and you know, Eastern practice have a lot of value. And my sign, or, like, my horoscope is so true to me. It's insane. Like, when I went down the rabbit hole of, like, I was like, this is so me. Like, like, the time the day I was born, like, that whole thing, I put it in, I was like, it was like this book of, like, who I am. And I've never read anything that was so just me. And I was like, wow. So there's value in that, like I said, but for myself. I don't think there's value in it for other people, once again, because I'm like, you end up boxing them in because you don't know how much that quality of theirs stretches. Because I know you said this, but I'm actually, when I was thinking and feeling, like, I was, like, one question away from both of those.
Okay, here's the thing. Here, like, in the test, right?
Yeah.
This is the issue with the test.
Yeah.
The test completely skews and messes up your entire, I'm saying you, like, second person you, not you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the test really messes up how you perceive personality types, because if you answer, like, for example, you got an ENTJ, right? If you answered one question differently, you would have been an ENFJ.
Yeah.
Those are two totally different types, completely different. But you wouldn't be able to tell unless you studied the functions, because on the letters, it's just like, oh, it's like one letter difference. Two totally different types. Because they operate on two different function sets. Which, I'm saying all that to say, the way they make decisions is fundamentally different. And so the issue with some of these personality tests, which is why, like, I encourage anyone who gets it's take multiple tests, but then treat your results as a ballpark and then do research, because ultimately only you will know what your actual type is. But that's where it is tricky, because, again, it's an arbitrary set of questions. So I think the test is a good place to start, but like anything,
Yeah,
don't let it label you.
That's what I'm
saying.
exactly.
Take it for, you know what I mean?
Like, all of this is a ballpark, and so there is ultimately no person you're never gonna get along with. Like, that can't occur.
100%.
And anything you perceive of someone else can always change.
Yep, and because the other thing too is, like I said, I thought that I was a thinking type for the longest time. I thought I was an introvert, which is crazy because what I didn't realize, I had such a binary understanding of personality theory or whatever. I didn't realize that extroverts can have a very strong introvert side, and of course we're obviously all ambiverts to some degree.
Yeah.
But we still have a natural bent. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I literally, because I was an introvert, or I thought that I was an introvert, I placed myself in situations where I thought I would thrive, where I wasn't thriving. And I realized I was an extrovert in an introverted surrounding because I was homeschooled, right? So it was just a naturally introverted surrounding. So I thought, because I fit myself to that mold, I was like, oh, this is my type. I was dead wrong.
Yeah.
Dead wrong. And once I realized what my actual type was, I was like, oh, I can start putting myself in positions to actually succeed based off of what I actually know my core values are. But you won't get anywhere unless you actually truly know your core values, personality type or not. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then at that point, then the real work actually begins. You know?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's over. It doesn't matter, guys. End the podcast.
No, literally, because I'm like, it doesn't matter because it's
but it
also,
does at the same time.
No, but it changes when people that work on themselves, they can change that part of them.
Yeah, 100%.
Because I, have experienced so many different. I've experienced so many different answers to the same questions. Throughout my life. What I answered when I was 15 is different than when I was 18, is different than when I was 22. And hence, it has changed. I have went from a thinking to a feeling person. And that's why I was saying it's changed. When I was, in 10th grade, I took the test, I was a robot. I was so much self-discipline. You know the person you mentioned at the beginning of this episode, the accountant example? I was thinking, damn, that used to be me 10 years ago.
Do you think that was also because, similar to me, that was based off of the surroundings that you were in that then informed what your personality type was like at the time? Because I feel like adolescence is such a formative time. You know what I mean?
For me, it wasn't necessarily my environment as much as it was my intrinsic motivation to succeed. I told you this, but growing up in the midst of 2 recessions and facing financial instability and overall instability in life, I had always strived for stability. And so I was like a machine ready to be successful because I was done being, poor or financially unstable or just a life that was with a lot of hardships. When I was growing up, my I experienced that with my family, and we moved here, and I was an immigrant here, and I didn't speak English, then I learned English, and just so many different things that shaped me that when I got into elementary, middle school, I was ready to be I'm gonna I'm gonna get all A's, I'm gonna wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, I'm gonna do all of these things in order for me to quote, be successful and go to a great college and get a great job. I think the typical immigrant American dream. Because of those things, growing up, I just had this innate need to be successful, and I was willing to do anything I had to do to be successful. Yeah. And I had just so much discipline and so much intrinsic motivation, and I was like, I am going to be successful. It was later on that I realized there's no such thing as successful, and the capitalistic dream is very capitalistic in nature. And all of these other things, but I'm saying and then I had my own mental health struggles. That
adds a whole other layer to it.
Yeah, it adds a whole other layer to it. On top of that, I met my best friends for life. I told you this, I went to a very white school. I was not only the only Indian or the only South Asian, I was the only Asian. And that's really saying something. And so, anyways, I was just in a space where I always felt so I only have me, I got me, and I thrived on that. I thrived on the otherness. I thrived I am different, I am unique, I'm gonna go, be successful, and I got this. And I did, if you saw my resume from high school, you would think I was not a real person. Because I literally didn't have a single grade under 100. Like, it was just above 100. I was, like, president of, like, 10 clubs.
No way.
Shut up. I, like, went to school early to do stuff, stayed at school late to do a club, and then also did, like, sports. Like, I was just, like, I just think back and I'm like, I was not real, and I don't know how I did that, because I can't do half of those things right now. But I'm saying I was also more introverted. Now I'm, like, completely different. I'm so extroverted. I am a lot more of an empathetic person, even though you might think differently.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I was not an empathetic person. Like, I would not, before, I would be like, okay, and, not that I'm not, I feel like I am in situations, but I am so much more empathetic now. I feel so much now. I used to not. And then, I feel like there's so many different parts of my life growing up, mental health. I already said these things, but I think those led to me changing my personality type. And it wasn't me just, I'm saying even in the last couple of years, past being a teenager, even being a young adult, that has changed. I was 10 times more of an extrovert last year than I am right now. Like, that just changed. And I feel like I'm going back into my introvertedness.
And, well, because the thing is, I think, too, and that's the thing, people are three-dimensional.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like my mom, even though she has a far better understanding of her emotional side now, she's still, like, at the end of the day, like, she's still a thinker. You know what I mean? But that's not all that she is, because that's the thing, too, is it's like your strengths are your strengths for a reason. So then you get to the point, if you want to get there, where you just start adding on to your strengths by working on your weaknesses. It's just growth, and I feel like that's what you experience, too.
Yeah.
And so it's a good, I think, with personality types, obviously people, and I'm sure people in the comments, like, let us know what you think, because I'm sure there's going to be a vast range of opinions.
Yeah, of course.
But I think it's a good starting point, and I think you take it as far as you personally feel like you need it to go before you're like, you know what, I can take it from here, and I can do what works for me.
Yeah.
Now, some of y'all, what's working for you is not actually working. but you know what I mean? Yeah. Some people just suck.
Yeah. No. I'm here for it.
No. But generally, I think you take it as far as you need it. But it's a good place to start. It's good to learn about it and see if it works for you.
Yeah, as you put it earlier, the perfect way to put it is that it's a ballpark. It's a range. You have more of some things, less of other things, and that can be cultivated, it can be changed, you can create new habits.
For example, I'll say this very quickly, I'm an ENFP, right? So one of the stereotypes of that personality type is that, they might be like wildly creative and passionate, but they're disorganized and they procrastinate and they never get things done. I've never, and also that was also a view that I had, and I was that at one point. That was the base version of myself. I've never been more organized in my life.
Period.
Ever. Yep. To the point where I now would say I actually feel like I am an organized person. Literally 2 years ago, the thought of writing notes down, I couldn't do it. Yeah. Literally.
Even last year, I was telling you about being a planner, and you were like, and I see you today, and I'm like, okay, wow, and Dillon, who's this?
Yeah, no, and so it's just, it's cool to kind of be like, no, I am who I am, this is my core. But I can add on to that, and I can become something else. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I one last thing I want to kind of mention again is that personality types isn't who you are.
Yeah.
And you can take it for self-reflection, introspection into yourself, because you can juxtapose it with, like, I personally felt this way when this thing happened, but my personality type tells me this. Which is completely different when you use it to figure other people out. And I think that's where it's, like, down the wrong lane. Because it's, like, you can never truly know someone through their type. And so I still never am, like, wanting to know someone's sign or their personality type right away. Because I'm like, I'm afraid, I don't want to box them in. I'm like, I want to get to know you for who you are before this. Because I also know that it can change. And I just don't want to I don't want to be like, this person's always like this, because as humans we are like that, like, oh, they really changed. They were so extrovert in the situation, and I'm like, people change. Like, I try to always keep that in mind, like, just because you are at your core, or like this in this moment, you can be completely different with people you like in a different situation, but when you're uncomfortable versus feeling safe versus feeling super safe and just around people you love and things like that. Like, I am a different person, and I'm not talking about, like, changing your colors and acting fake. I mean genuinely feeling and acting a different way when I am with my friends versus my family versus my mom versus my sister. And I don't say those things as in like age-wise or it's just, I mean like there are things where I feel safe and just I feel like I can just like I can unfortunately take my family for granted. Like they're gonna love me regardless, so I can do and say things where I'm not afraid of being judged or anything. In other spaces, I might or like when I'm with my friends, I also don't feel like I'm being judged or anything. But I feel I feel open to say other types of things or be more extroverted in a different sense or thinking or judgmental in a different sense. You know, I was talking to my friends the other day about being trolling versus being a hater versus bullying versus spilling the tea and all those things. And I wouldn't say those things to my family or anything. So I feel like people are just so different. Yeah. So it's like, that's what I think. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I agree. And I think also, too, I think what, you know, it's always good to be aware of it, but then you leave it be.
Yeah.
And you know, because I think, too, one thing you might find, I know I used to find this, I used to be confused. I'm like, why do I act differently in front of different people, blah, blah, blah. I didn't realize it's literally our frequencies bouncing off each other to create something entirely new, whether it's that dynamic or conversation. So that's also sometimes, I actually, you know, and this is kind of why we started this podcast, sometimes so that we can disagree or just have slightly, you know what I mean? Yeah. I think it's helpful to at least know all the elements at play. Really? Wow, okay. Yeah, because I just think that... Like, you're saying, wait, in what sense, like, you should know their type first, you're saying? Yeah, I think so. Even if it's a range, because then it makes you always aware exactly of why things are the way that they are. What you choose to do with it is completely up to you. And sometimes you can be dead wrong. Like I said, 90 to 95% accuracy. I had someone very, very close to me who I realized after 2 years, I had their type dead wrong. And I was so embarrassed because I pride myself on being able to know people's type well because I've studied it. And so you can be really wrong and that happens at times. But I think generally, you know, it's at least it's good to know. Even this goes back to why we're such different types. Yeah. And because I think it's good for like types not to label again similar to yours to know it. Because they will view it as a range. I don't think it's for types like me. Once again, I'm labeling not really to know it right away because you'll do so. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because I think I will just take it and go and run with it. Oh, you're extroverted. I'm just taking it and running with it. And to tie a bow on this, that's the difference between a J and a P. Yeah. That's, you know what I mean? So it's this big cycle. Do you want to say what they are? Oh, yeah. That's a judging, for people who know, like the judging personality type who's typically a lot more, generally speaking, a lot more, like, you know, systematic with their decision making. And Hi. We're back filming on my janky phone because the camera died this time, so basically that means we need to shut up because I feel like my phone's gonna explode or something. Everything that we're trying to film is just like stop talking. Yeah, sorry, we're gonna end this, but basically it was Dillon explaining a J versus a P, and that's the end of it. Yeah, which, you know what? Google it. But basically, J's and P's tend to be a little bit more flexible and like, you know, in their decision making, they will, and I did all this video. What if you saw it from this point of view? Blah, blah, blah. Whereas J's tend to be a lot more decisive. And they're just kind of like, this is how it is, and we're going to run with it, and I'm going to build on top of that. Of course, everything is in a spectrum. Yeah. But that's kind of the whole point of this podcast. Everything's important. Like, everything is on a spectrum, but it's important to know what the spectrum even is. Yeah. Awesome. Wow, we did it. We, like, we stopped. We, like, had a string of thoughts that were concise. Wow. We did it, guys. Oh, wow. Man. I'll let everyone here go. Everyone's checking their watch. They're like, oh my god. See you next episode. Yes, if you made it this far, you're a real one. If you made it this far, I'm not even apologizing because you wanted to be here, which I appreciate. Okay, love. Yeah. Period. Thank you for watching. Seriously. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Wait, what are we doing next time? Oh. We don't know what we're doing next time. Let's actually, I don't know why you asked me that. Goodbye.